Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's your boy, Pigskin Pete. Happy Wednesday to everybody. Today, we're going to talk about the Florida State Seminoles and the past, the present, and possibly the future. Now, I thought hard about doing a schedule breakdown and record prediction for 2020 for Florida State, but after looking at Florida State's schedule, then I looked at Miami's schedule, then I looked at Virginia's schedule, and so on and so forth. I'm sitting here going, man, anybody not named Clemson in the ACC right now, it's impossible to predict how they're going to do when they face each other. And the reason is because there's so much turnover right now in the ACC coaching-wise. We've got a lot of first-year head coaches. We got a lot of second-year head coaches. So it's just very unpredictable. But what I want to talk about today instead of the schedule, I'll do the schedule thing maybe later on in the offseason as we get closer to the kickoff of the 2020 season. The fall of Florida State over the past 2 years has been somewhat of a head-scratcher for a lot of college football fans. When you look at Florida State, as a football team and as a football program over the past 30 or 40 years, so I'm almost 40, so my entire life, at least, Florida State has been a blue chip football program up until a couple of years ago. With Bobby Bowden there, and even the first, probably the majority of the time that Jimbo was there, at least half of the time, Florida State was a powerhouse. Like I said, multiple national championships, owned the ACC up until 5 or 6 years ago. And then sort of a weird departure with Jimbo Fisher leaving and going to A&M, then the Willie Taggart debacle. And there's just so many different theories on what's going on there and how to fix it. I don't think there's an easy answer to any of those questions, but I'm going to try to dive into a little bit of my own opinion and also something I heard on the radio this morning. So every morning I listen to the First Team show. You probably have heard me refer to that show a lot. It's Greg McElroy every morning. It's usually Danny Cannell during the football season. I think right now it's somebody else. Anyways, it's a great college football show every morning from 7 to 10 on satellite radio. But today they were talking about Florida State, and they had on ESPN College Football Insider for an interview Mark Schlabach. And you guys probably know who he is. I think he hosts College Football Live and all of that. But so Greg McElroy was asking him, like, what's the issue other than the obvious things at Florida State? And he said there's a money issue and there's an athletic department issue. Now, if you go back to Jimbo Fisher, let's take a step back, and then I'll tell you what the bomb that he dropped about what Florida State is planning on doing as far as the athletic department and the marriage with the boosters and all that. Something really weird that I want some clarification on. If you're a Florida State fan out there and you're in the know, because I'm not. I'm just going off of what these guys are saying. But going back to Jimbo Fisher's departure. So Bobby Bowden before him was a legend and had built a culture there. It was just a different time, though. Okay, it was just a different time. Now, facilities and all that, and with the modernization of the game, recruiting has changed to completely national, where it used to be a regional thing. But anyway, so Bobby Bowden had a long run and retires. Promotes Jimbo Fisher to they promote Jimbo Fisher to head coach. Jimbo Fisher's a great coach, okay? I'm not a big fan of his personally. I think he's kind of somewhat of a used car salesman, snake oil salesman type of guy. That's just my opinion on him. But X's and O's wise, recruiting wise, and talent evaluation wise, and even talent development wise, he's elite. One of the best in the country. You can't take that away from him. But why did Jimbo Fisher pick up and leave Florida State to go to Texas A&M? It was a money issue, not his paycheck type of money. I mean, that has something to do with it. He got a huge contract at A&M, but more of a commitment and the marriage between the head coaching staff, the boosters, and the athletic department. So Florida State was not willing, the athletic department was not willing to keep up with the Joneses in the modern age of football. Now, Clemson had taken that torch from him, beat them a few years in a row. That might have had something to do with it. But he saw, I'm sure if Jimbo Fisher saw a commitment to keep up with Clemson's facilities and have support from the athletic department in that way, he may have stayed there and fought it out with Clemson in the ACC. But they weren't willing to do that. A&M has deep pockets and has a complete and total commitment to football and winning championships. Will he do that there? That's to be seen. But anyways, they have his back, and he's got a lot of control and a lot of say there. He didn't have a lot of say at Florida State, at least as not as much as he wanted. Now, the thing that Greg McElroy asked was, if this is how can this be a financial issue at a place like Florida State, somebody that has so much history, especially in recent years, 30, 40 years of winning a lot, have a huge alumni base. It's a football school. How can they not have the financial commitment in the athletic department to football that, say, a Clemson does, or an Alabama, or an LSU, or an Ohio State? Go down the list. And that seems unthinkable. Well, what Mark Schlabach said surprised me. He said you would think that, but the issue is with them is that the money guys that they do have, the boosters that they do have, want control of the program, and this is a problem. Also, what he said that blew my mind was they are in the works right now that sometime within the next year or two to transform the way that they make decisions there, and they're going to merge the boosters with the athletic department and make it a private entity. Now, I've never heard of this happening before. I'm sure this has probably happened before and I just don't know it. Maybe this is an issue at the University of Texas as well, because we know that some of these schools, the money guys control everything. They decide who gets hired, who gets fired, even recruiting. They're calling all the shots, and that's problematic. So maybe somebody can clarify that for me. And so basically the boosters, when they're not happy with recruiting, or they're not happy with a certain coach, even whether it's the head coach or an assistant coach or whatever, they just stop giving you money. And they say, we want to have the power. So it looks like, according to what he's saying, and I don't know this, that Florida State's athletic department is giving into this and allowing this to happen, which is bad news as far as I'm concerned, because you don't want guys with an emotional investment, as far as being an alumni with a lot of money, calling the shots as far as how the program's run. Now, everybody's influenced by money in some way. There's no program out there that's not reliant on booster money, but they should not be calling the shots on day-to-day basis and hires and all that. You know how I know that? Because I'm a Clemson fan. If you go back to the time that Dabo Swinney got the interim job, that's one thing to get the interim job. When they named him the full-time head coach, I know for a fact that there was a split in both the fan base and probably even some of the Clemson boosters, the money guys, that were questionable about Dabo Swinney getting that job. He had never been a head coach in college football. He had never been even a coordinator. He was just a wide receiver coach. So even though after he got hired as full-time head coach, because the athletic director at that time, Terry Don Phillips, believed in him, and he was an elite recruiter, and the team, the players loved him and all of that. So that's why he got hired in the first place. There were some big name coaches out there that were interested in the Clemson job, but they took Dabo, the wide receiver coach, instead. But even after that, after the first few seasons that were a little bit rocky, and listen, he had some big wins, and he started to recruit well there and change the culture there. And so a lot of fans like me, there was never a point where I wanted to see Dabo Swinney fired, because I could see the trajectory going up. But after losing to South Carolina 4 or 5 times in a row, there were some fans out there, and even some boosters, I'm sure, that were putting pressure on Clemson's athletic department to fire him and go get somebody else. But they were still winning 10 games a year at that point, which is something, on a regular basis, that's something they hadn't done in a while. They're still going to New Year's Six bowl games and winning some of them, something they hadn't done before. So they stuck with Dabo Swinney despite some of the fan pressure and some of the money pressure. And if they didn't do that, where would Clemson be right now? So that's why it's important to have a solid athletic department that is working in sync with the coaching staff and blocking out the other noise. and not letting fan pressure and money pressure dictate everything, because it can be a recipe for disaster. So, and you see this with a lot of big schools. Like I said, I mentioned Texas as one of them, and I'm sure there are other ones out there. I don't really know about Nebraska so much. Nebraska has a tough sled for a lot of other reasons. The region of the country they're in and the modern age of football is just different than being in the Southeast or on the West Coast, but it is what it is. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. Now look, here's the bottom line. If what he said was true about them merging the boosters with the athletic department, and this is in layman terms, I don't know the actual technical term for what I'm trying to say here, but if that does happen and the boosters are starting to call shots ahead of the athletic director and making them the sole power, I think this can be a problem for Florida State. This is what led to the firing, in my opinion, the premature firing of Willie Taggart. If you don't even give a guy 2 seasons, that was all the boosters, and that was not the athletic department doing that. That was the boosters. And so, if that would have happened to Sweeney, where would we be right now? I don't know. But anyways, give me your thoughts on this if you're a Florida State fan. This is not a hate video towards Florida State. Look, here's the bottom line as far as I'm concerned. As much as I hate Florida State and their fans, being a Clemson fan my whole life, there's a lot of them around here where I live when I was growing up. They were always very arrogant, the Clemson fans, because they owned us for most of that time. And I've never forgot that, so there's no love lost for Florida State. But the bottom line is, as a college football fan, and even as a Clemson fan, I want to see Florida State get better. I want to see Miami get better. I want to see Virginia Tech get better. Not as good as Clemson, but better. You know how much I used to look forward to game week every year against Florida State in that matchup. And now it's deflating, right? Now these past few years, it's like, well, was Clemson going to beat them by 30, 40, or 50 this time? There's really no doubt who's going to win the game. I want it to be exciting again. Let's put it that way. And I want to see the ACC elevate to where they were a few years ago, and I hope that happens. But anyway, give me your thoughts, comments, criticisms down below, especially if you're a Florida State fan or a Clemson fan, and let me know what you think about this. I thought it was interesting. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. I'll get more into Florida State and their schedule at a later date. Have a great day. Pigskin Pete is checking out.